What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the H Panel, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and as you can see, quarantine got the best of my hairstyle. I kind of like it personally. I like it long. I've never had it this long before. But I have been hearing mixed reception. So if you are watching on YouTube, I'd love to hear your input. Please send me a message. Give me some constructive criticism. If you don't like it, let's just be nice about it. All right. I would really appreciate that. So for this episode of the show, I'm joined by Leah Berdysz. Leah is an author and the founder of Empowered and Poised, which is a company that aims to empower and educate girls on how to be beautiful from the inside out through mental, physical, and social components. Leah was so fun to talk to, and I wanted to thank her again for coming on and having this discussion with me. Now for the two quotes that we're going to start this episode off with. Shout out to everyone who submitted answers on Instagram. The first one I've got here is from my mother. One bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. Thanks, Mom. And number two here is be yourself. People will talk no matter what. And I feel like I'm a great example of that because of my beautiful, luscious locks that I'm showing you guys before this episode. Without further ado, guys, if you are listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars, share with someone who might need to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I cannot wait for you guys to listen. I hope you enjoy. I'll talk to you all soon. Peace. I'm Harry Potvin, and this is the H Panel. So I wanted to get to know you a little better, Leah. So what inspired you to found Empowered and Poised?
Yeah, so I graduated from John Carroll in 2017, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do after school. And I'm a very passion-driven person, and so I decided that it was a good idea to start my own business right when I graduated. Whether or not that ended up being a good idea or not, I don't really know. Um, but I also was fortunate that I had the opportunity to teach phys ed for 4 years to all girls, first through sixth grade. And through that experience and my own struggles, I realized that there was a need for the programming that I'm doing to help young women with social skills and teaching them about, social, mental, and physical well-being. So it was the combination of experiences of my own and then the need I saw in the communities that I work with.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. So going back to your personal experiences, um, you said you
Mhm.
experienced body image issues and anxiety as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have anxiety, right? Because it's not ever something that fully goes away. You just learn how to manage it. And I would like to also, share that there are healthy levels of stress and anxiety, right? And I've mentioned this in other podcasts before, but like eustress versus distress, where, if you're a little bit nervous because you're going on a podcast or going to speak in front of a crowd, that's actually a good thing and can help you to perform better. It's where it goes over that it becomes unhealthy. And unfortunately, that was kind of the place that I was in, just like, continuously ruminating thoughts and, feeling like things were just going to go poorly, even though that was probably not the case and things of that nature. So I was able to start going to therapy and I'm now on medication and that has helped tremendously. And I've also learned a lot of skills, through my own education to be able to implement those. So I feel really grateful that I have the support system and the resources to be able to, learn how to manage these things and realize this is just a part of who I am.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure that helps when you're, teaching these young girls as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it's that kind of relatability factor to be like, hey, I've been there too and I get it. Like, I really get it.
Yeah, that's important because when you're young and struggling, like even if there are resources out there, you feel like you're the only one in the world that's going through that.
Mhm.
So you're like no one even understands it. So having like a role model who goes, "Yeah, man, I've been there. It's been shit."
Sure.
Helps.
Sure. Yeah, that's so funny that you said that because as I was interviewing somebody who was a mom, uh, they said something along the lines of, "Yeah, my daughter always says to me, 'Mom, you just don't get it.'"
Mm,
And I think there are certain things that the generations below us that we're not going to get. And I think that's okay. You don't have to get and understand everything. I think, it's just about being there, being present, and being empathetic to what it is they're going through because the reality is we're never fully going to understand the struggle of anyone. That's just like, people from different races and cultures and backgrounds and things like that. You know, I think you can get pushback, when you are, not necessarily in that same group. But the reality is, if you come from a place of, being curious, I think that there's no way that you can go wrong. Being curious and being empathetic and making sure that you place yourself in a position where you're not trying to act like you know it all.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to go, no matter what group of people you're working with. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, see, the biggest thing is like, well, I'm not a young girl, but like for when I was struggling, um, when I talked to people about it, they would they would try to give me advice and they would try to tell me exactly what to do and like list it out, and that like turned my brain off so much. I was like, I'm gonna not do it even more now because you said that.
Mhm.
So like my advice to anybody would be just listen. It's easy and it doesn't feel like it does enough. But I was talking to a guy yesterday. He had gone through a breakup during lockdown and he was in a really rough spot, and he had never dealt with mental health issues before, so it was like all really new to him. But he said like the biggest moments that he remembered like recovering from it were like his friends coming over with ice cream. Like
I love ice cream.
I know. I'm lactose
Too
intolerant.
much.
I'm lactose intolerant, but I fight it.
Ugh, my goal is ice cream every other day instead of every day.
That's
That's where I'm at.
a tough goal.
It's like my one. It's the one thing that it just gets me. I've been doing pretty good though. You should be proud of me, Harry.
I'm very proud. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no. I'm lactose, so I'm like I can't have ice cream, and then my mom's boyfriend will bring home like tubs, and he's like, "After dinner, it's moose tracks." I'm like, "Come on, man."
Oh, that's one of my favorite. That one's so good.
Dude,
So I want to go back to what we were talking about, and I'm actually curious to know a little bit more about your story and the challenges that you faced and what's brought you here, and kind of why we're having this conversation today. Even.
Yeah, of course. So my problems, I can't really pinpoint exactly where they started, but
Mhm.
I just know I was really young, and by really young, I mean like before high school, like elementary school. At some point, I started, feeling. I had always felt as like a different kid. I was more emotional than the other guys, and because of that, I was bullied pretty hard for it. Because I would
Mhm.
cry and I'd be like, I don't know, I had feelings, and guys were like, "That's so stupid. You're not a man, right?" So um I was called every name in the book. And anyway, so it kind of got to me, and then through high school I started, cuz as a teenager you get more emotional, you have all these hormones acting up. So my
Mhm.
brain started going nuts because I had already had those problems. Well, I don't want to call them problems, but I already had like, you know, things going on. And so I tried
Sure.
to tell people about them, and like I tried reaching out to people, and whoever I reached out to would go, they would hit me back with like, how do you think that makes me feel though? Or like, you shouldn't say that, it makes me feel bad and it's stupid to think that way. So I was like, well shit, I guess I won't say anything then. So then I didn't say anything all throughout high school about how I felt. And like my parents went through a pretty bad divorce, and like divorce is divorce, like it happens. But I was kind of like, I was the biggest kid, I was the most emotional kid of the three of us siblings, and I was kind of like
Mhm.
the middle child as well. Like by middle child I mean like I relayed info from my parents to my other siblings. Like I was
I
the
see.
middle ground, right?
Sure.
So going into high school, I had all these stressors around me. And so I never checked up on them. I became a hothead because the only way I knew how to react to those emotions was anger, because
Mhm.
that's what I was taught as a young boy. So I was just labeled a hothead. And that's the only, I just kind of pushed those feelings to the side because I just assumed that I was, different. I was angry. I was one of those guys. And then in like grade 11 and 12 I was able to kind of mask it because I had so many things going on. Like I was a swimmer, I played rugby, I did all like extracurriculars, so I never had time to myself. And then when I got to university, all those distractions went away, and then I really had to face what was brewing in me
Mhm.
since grade like elementary school. And I was like, shit, there's a lot going on here. But I didn't want to tell anybody because me saying, hey, I feel like dying, or I feel like, I really hate myself, that wasn't like ever talked about. where I was. And like even in athletics and like male athletics especially, it was never talked about. So I just kind of kept brushing it off, and then I got diagnosed with depression and anxiety in my first year, but I kind of shrugged it off. I was like, I don't want to be crazy. Like I refuse to believe that. So then I just never got help. And then it kind of got to a point in my last year where, I almost took my own life a couple times, but in the last attempt, I decided I was like, I can't do this anymore because by that point, I had gotten so comfortable with the idea that I didn't want to be here anymore. And it was like the only coping mechanism I had. So, like, if anything stressful happened or if anything was really bad, I was just like, well, I'm not going to be here much longer anyway. And that kind of brought me some calmness, which I realized was really messed up. So then I finally got the help and I finally started sharing my story. And then, yeah, we're here. I think that's it.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that and being vulnerable with me. I know, we don't have a personal relationship or anything, so thank you for, opening up that space and giving of yourself in that way. I absolutely love what you're doing and sharing your story and being vulnerable because it's hard. And I think honestly, it's even harder for males because of the way that, males are socialized to, like you said, not have feelings and not be whatever this week is or whatever. And the reality is everybody struggles, right? Everybody has things that they're going through. And I think it is really important for young men to hear stories from men like you, so that they know that they're not alone, just like the young women that I work with. I'm hoping to help them realize that they're not alone. And I actually, for all the listeners that are a part of the Empowered and Poised community or conscious empowerment community, I would love for you to share a little bit more about where you feel like young women and young men could go for support if they're in situations like yours. Um, what kind of resources do you wish you had when you were younger?
Oh man, let me pull out the book. I had nothing. But yeah, I first and foremost, I'd like, and this might be a tall order, but for parents to be a little more, educated on things. Just like on
Mhm,
like you don't have to be an expert on like depression, but just like be aware that it happens because and like this isn't a knock on my parents. They're great, but like that generation in general just never talked about it and never kind
mhm,
of acknowledged it as a real thing. So when people open up about it, they're like, that's not real. Like, stop saying
mhm,
that because they were
mhm,
always taught that that was crazy. And that's what I was taught
mhm,
as a kid through like entertainment and news and like movies, music. Like, if you had something wrong with your head, you were nuts and you were like in an insane asylum. So having like that parent figure, acknowledge that it's a real thing and that you can go to them when you're struggling, that's big. I'd love that.
mhm,
And then as a male athlete, but even like students, like older students or older team members on a sport team, if you're able to um, be there for the younger students, that's huge. Because when I was growing up, like in elementary school and high school, my swim team, well, I was usually the oldest guy, but when I was the youngest guy, the only way that the older guys knew how to react to things was to punch the lockers or like just swear at people. So growing
mhm.
up, I was like, oh, that's how you deal with when you're sad. So then I grew up like that, which is definitely not how you do it.
No. Now, did you ever have social skills groups in your schools? Because that's something, I don't know if you saw this or not, but I'm working towards my master's in social work and, oops, sorry. And my specialization is children, youth, and families with a certificate in school social work. And so that's one of the things I'm real passionate about is conducting groups in schools. Was
Mhm.
that ever something that you had at the schools that you went to?
Nope, never. That'd be great.
And do you feel like something like that would have been useful because it would have put kind of that, nugget in your head that okay, I don't have to just get angry. Here are other ways that I could release, these emotions, whether it be learning, how to meditate or how to deep breathe or where to go. Do you feel like that would have been something at a young age that would have maybe changed how you reacted when you were struggling?
Oh yeah, big time. Because growing up, the only reactions I knew were happy and angry. So
Mhm.
being able to, because there's such a big scale of emotions that you can feel, but those were the only two
Sure.
that boys when I was growing up were, acknowledging. So
Mhm.
so this group setting that you're talking about, so it'd be like kind of a class almost?
So, I mean, like with Empowered and Poised, what we do is we go into different schools or community based organizations, and we primarily work with young women, but we've also done some stuff with young boys as well. And perhaps that's something that we would expand to in the future. The reason that I work with young women is mostly because I am a woman. And so I understand that on a deeper level. And there are biological differences between young men and young women. And I think having somebody that looks more like you and has experienced those things is important. That's not to say that somebody from a different gender or background can't help you as well. This is just, it's happened to be my passion where I've had the most experience. But when we work with the schools, what we do is each week is a different topic. So, for example, maybe one week is self awareness, and so we'll have discussions, do hands on activities. It's a lot of fun. So it's not, just like, reading out of a book or anything like that. It's really an engaging way to work with the girls to help them to learn what their strengths and their constraints are. Then another week will be a different topic, and maybe that will be resolution or team building, or we have a whole array of topics, but it's all these social emotional skills. And with having a background in exercise science, I also add in the wellness component. Because I'm sure as an athlete, there are tremendous benefits to sports and to physical activity. When your endorphins are rushing, it makes you feel good. And, so for me, it's really about being socially, mentally, and physically fit. And I would venture to say that for a lot of people, including myself, also being spiritually fit as well. That's something that's important in my life. We don't necessarily in our programs just because we're aware that we work with, all types of girls, and we don't want to make that something that makes them feel as though they're being excluded. But yeah, so it's just, we go into schools and work with them in that way. But, as a social worker, these are also groups that, you know, in that social worker role that you do throughout the course of the day. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed is starting to also help to educate other teachers, because just because you're an adult doesn't mean you understand that. So, like you said, it's important for adults to have this education and this knowledge. And so, right now, I was fortunate through one of my internships with a local school district that I am helping in the preparation of a back to school plan that is trauma informed, to help educators, because kids are, some of them are very scared to go back to school because they haven't socialized in so long. I mean, I can't even imagine how challenging that is on a young person. And let's be honest, it also is for all the teachers. I mean, this past year has been tough.
Mhm.
um, so we're developing a plan to help them figure out different strategies of how they can help their students with whatever it is they are facing when they come back.
That's huge. Yeah, no, because like they opened schools, but all these cases were rising when they did. So that just leaves such a big imprint. I feel like they're not like, like already don't talk about the mental health repercussions of these continuing lockdowns. We already don't talk about that enough, but we definitely don't talk about the impact on young kids. Like as adults, like, yeah, it's still in some way traumatic for us, but we're able to kind of recognize that and adjust
Hmm.
accordingly. But as a kid, you
Hmm.
don't know anything. You're
Hmm.
just growing up. You're trying to figure yourself out.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, no, that program's so great because, and like you said, the teachers, if you were a teacher going into lockdown or going back to school after during the pandemic and you saw these cases rising, like
Hmm.
that's got to be scary.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you think about it, and it's like these teachers are going through the trauma at the same time the children are. So
Hmm.
that's something that we've talked a lot about on the teams that I'm on, is like, it's very easy to educate when you're not in the midst of it, but we are in the midst of it. And it's brand new, something we've never dealt with before. So trying to figure out what types of strategies will work for something that's brand new. So it's been an interesting year. I think there's a lot to learn. And I will say though, I think that there are some definite silver linings in everything that's happened. And I think it's also important to not look at just the negative,
Hmm.
but also look at what is positive, that's come out of this. And I think people are giving each other a little bit more grace because of the challenging times we're in. And I think people are starting to talk more openly about mental health and the struggles that they've been going through this year, which I think is great. I think there's still a long way to go. But nonetheless, it's great that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%. I've definitely seen it more now than I've ever seen it.
hmm
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was even something that gave me some courage. And the book, the book that I'm writing has and shares a lot of the struggles that I've gone through. And, in the past, I think a lot of people would have been really afraid to share these kinds of things that you and I are sharing because it could potentially hurt, your career outlook, or people might look at you funny, or might think you're incompetent, or, that you can't work with the students because you have your own issues, that kind of thing. But I think that that's starting to get better, and I think people are starting to appreciate it more. Um, Again, there's still work that needs to be done, and it is still sometimes. I mean, I don't know if you find this, but for me, as I was writing my book, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to share this, and then I'm like,
yep.
no, if I'm going to tell these girls to do it, I can too.
Yeah, 100%. Every time I make a post, I'm like, "Should I say that?" Like that, yeah, exactly. That's kinda what held me back from admitting anything for so long, because I was like, "If my employer sees this, I'm screwed. They're
Mhm.
gonna let me go." Because it used to be like that, I guess.
Yeah, well, and like you said with the parents, is I also am very fortunate to have really great parents, but I remember my little sister, she's somewhat like me, and what she shares online being very vulnerable and open and things like that. And I remember my parents one time being like, I don't know if you should put that on there.
Mhm.
And it's like, I get what they're saying, and they're just looking out for her and her best interest. And quite frankly, there probably are still employers that could, turn away. So you do need to be aware and mindful of the things that you're putting out, and the image that you are portraying to the world. But I think that also you need to be authentic to who you are and share of yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that.
It's kind of
Uh,
striking a balance, which can be tough.
yeah. On the topic of, putting yourself out there on social media, I wanted to talk about, kind of, because I've said this before, like, we live in a comparative society almost. And I feel like, so what kind of impacts does social media have on young women in terms of empowerment?
So in the positive side,
Yeah, let's talk about that.
yeah, that's a good question, because I think a lot of times we frame this in like, how does
Mhm.
social media negatively impact young women, and we know that it does. But I think if we're looking at it from a more positive perspective, is these things that we're talking about, is that I think people are becoming more open and vulnerable and sharing their stories and building communities. I mean, I can't tell you how many supportive networks that I'm in through Facebook. I mean, female entrepreneurship groups, and you know, this isn't necessarily female based, but social work groups, and parenting groups, and there's just so many different groups and support out there, that I think becoming involved in those, and also being able to educate yourself through some of these, because I think, at least with Empowered Employees, we also try to put out educational information linked to credible resources, like our website, which we'll sometimes share on our social media about, has a resource page, and it's got basically any hotline that you could think of. And Harry, if you ever want to take a look at it, let me know if there's any things that you think should be added to it, because we're always looking for more resources that are credible and can help the people that we work with. But yeah, I would say the community is a big one, and I would say the educational component is another really big way that it can help young women.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's also like this, support component, like, because I was talking to someone about this a couple days ago, but like, you're almost never alone. And if you use that the right way, like, let's say, you have no like, it's hard for you to make friends in the real world. It hard, like, outside of the
Yeah, sure, I
computer.
get what you're saying.
Yeah. So let's say it's hard for you to make friends in the real world. There's always one account on, like, social media or on the internet, or one person. There's 8 billion of us, and most people have an Instagram. So there's always someone that is willing to listen.
hmm
I feel like that's so
Yeah.
different from when we were growing up.
hmm Yeah, no, I totally agree. I will say though, when it comes to young people, you also have to be careful who you're
Right.
connecting with,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
So I don't want to neglect sharing the potential dangers in social media and the online world for young people. But I totally agree with you. I think when it comes to communities and it's also been great, like, with COVID, I think another positive thing that's come out of this pandemic is that there are a lot of different you know, webinars and workshops and more low cost and affordable groups and, coffee and chats and different things like that that you can become involved in. I don't know if there's necessarily as much of that for young people, but for adults, I think definitely a way to connect and, also just college age students too because like you said college can be a struggle for a lot of people. It's another huge transition period, and so I think that that is also a great way that college age students can connect with one another is through these different events as well that are all online now.
Yeah, especially now when like campuses are closed. It's like so
Yeah,
hard to make friends.
yeah, totally. So where did you go to college?
University of Guelph. I don't know if
I'm
it's in
not
Ontario.
familiar.
I'm in Canada.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's probably why I didn't hear of
Yeah, I
it.
was gonna say, I was like, I don't think it's big enough to be significant, but yeah, I
Yeah,
went
I went to a
for
small school too, and I
yeah,
liked that. For me, that was perfect. I looked for something smaller because I learned better, in a smaller classroom environment and wanted to have the ability to get to know my professors on a more personal level and, have them know me too. So,
yeah, that's exactly why I picked Guelph. It was so homey. It had like the
mhm,
hometown vibe. I was like, oh yeah,
mhm.
I want to go here.
And what's your background in?
Biology.
Interesting.
Hmm.
So, like the science behind all of this then.
Well, I don't know about that. Like through uni, my whole thing was I just got to survive. So, but
Sure.
yeah, I have a pretty like all jokes aside, I have a pretty good idea. I couldn't recite you word for word what happens up there, but I like have a decent background. I think I'd like to think so.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, we still need to talk about it. You can always learn more, right?
Yeah. 100%.
So, do you do anything with your biology degree at this point then?
I work at the zoo here in Canada, like the Toronto Zoo.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I teach kids about all the animals we've got.
I was waiting to see if you had it. I don't know if you froze.
Oh, did you hear what I said?
You teach the kids about the animals.
Yeah, all the animals we have, I teach them about them.
Oh, that's really cool. I feel
Yeah.
like that'd be such a fun job. I have a friend and she works at the zoo in Pittsburgh. And
Mm,
she loves working, with all the animals and things like that. She's more like video and marketing and things of that nature. But that's really fun.
yeah, yeah, you learn very quickly that kids can be nasty. You learn how to deal with them.
Some kids are, but here, like let's put this into mental health perspective though, Harry, right? Is why are some of them nasty? What is
Mhm.
it that they're going through? Like, do they have some mental health concerns that aren't being taken care of or addressed? Have they faced trauma or they don't know how to express their emotions? Or, at home, maybe they're neglected and they're just seeking attention. So I think, for as much as what you're saying can be true, right? Like some kids are just genuinely nasty little kids, right? But I think that the majority of them more so needs skills or have experienced something that could be really challenging. And I think that that's something that's really important for adults and educators to consider is why? Why is this child acting and behaving the way that they are and how can I help?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because, we dismiss them pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Like, if a
And it's
kid's
easy to get really frustrated. I mean, let's be honest. You have, five kids all running and jumping off walls. It's difficult.
yeah,
I mean, I when I was teaching, it was like, 20 some students and if you had two of them fighting but you're trying to manage the class, it can be tough.
mhm.
And right now it's like they're trying to manage their online classroom and their in-person classroom. Like I give teachers a lot of credit.
Yeah,
I
big
mean,
props to them.
having been one myself, you know, kudos to them.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, I have a good story about that camper thing, actually. I forget it. I wouldn't say his name anyway. Why do I care if I forgot it? But we because it's groups of 25,
Okay.
and so we were at lunch and we let them go because we had lunch in a tent, but we let them go outside just to run around and burn some energy off. And
Sure.
they were collecting snails, and as kids do. And this one kid took all the snails and just stomped on them and like killed them all. And he's like, ha ha ha. And he
Oh,
was laughing and everything. And I was like, oh, because he was such a headache the whole week. And so I pulled him aside and I was like, what are you doing, man? And he just burst like I said it like that. I was like, what are you doing? And he just burst into tears. And he was like, I can't help it. The voices in my head say to do it. And I was sitting there, I was like, that's a red flag. And so the at the end of the day, we were dropping them off to their parents, and his mom came over and she's like, how is he doing? And I was like, actually, can I talk to you for a second? And I was like, listen, he like said this. There must be something going on. Like, I was wondering if you were aware of that, blah, blah, blah. She goes, that's just classic blank. Haha. He just says the funniest things. I was like, good luck, man.
yeah. Well, I think that's where that educational piece comes in, right? Is that you're right. That is red flag. And that is something that the mom should not just dismiss, but she should look into further and, at least get him tested or have him talk to somebody or at least listen to him as the parent to what he's dealing with because, hurting animals and things like that are clear signs of, distress or a mental health issue.
Hmm. Yeah, even like parents are so scared to get their kids checked. They think it's
Mhm.
like this big thing.
I just don't think anybody wants to be quote unquote different.
That's
You
true.
know what I mean? It's hard. And parents want the best for their kids. And sometimes I feel a little funny about speaking about parents because I'm not a parent myself, but this is really, kind of my passion area. And even though I'm not a parent, I mean, I've worked with hundreds, probably, thousands of kids at this point where from experience, I have seen a lot of these things. Um, and I have friends whose kids are, feel like my own. So while I still don't fully understand the extent of being a parent, I do understand that they want what is best for their children. And for some parents, especially ones like we had, talked about before, who grew up in a different era when these things weren't as openly discussed and were kind of taboo, I think it's challenging. Like nobody wants to see their child struggle.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, 100%. So where can parents start like learning or educating themselves about this stuff?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of different places. I think when we talk about media, we are really fortunate to have Google at our hands, right? And there
Mhm.
is a lot of really great information out there. The only thing you have to be careful of is like what's true versus what's not true. So going to, more credible sites or, not everybody wants to read journal articles, but, research based journal articles are a good way to get information. Schools also provide a lot of really good information, as well as places like libraries and community centers. And then, in addition, it's important to just talk to other parents as support, like those Facebook groups, that support one another where they can ask questions or ask for resources. But I would say, yeah, like the school, the library, and other people in their network are really great places to go.
Yeah.
Doctors too,
Hmm.
going to your pediatrician. They often have really great resources, and if they don't have the answers, they can point you in the direction of a specialist who does.
Yeah, 100%. I love this because, we often talk, and I'm guilty of this too. We often talk about how we don't talk about mental health enough and like how there might be a crisis coming on and all of these things. But there's so many, like when you highlight all the resources available and like the fact that, our generation is getting more educated and we're helping the
Mhm.
older generation and the younger generation. So much brightness in the future.
Yeah, and something else that I've seen that I really love is I'm starting to see these more, I don't know if globally is the right word, but more globally, like I'll be watching a TV show and one of the commercials will pop up, a suicide hotline number, or, if you're watching some sort of show that might be triggering where they do talk about something like that, they pop those different things up. And I think that even that is helpful, or having more, athletes start to talk about it. Like, so I'm from the Cleveland area. So Kevin Love was a good example of how he
Mm,
was talking openly about his mental health. And, he's not the only one. There's also a lot of singers too, right? Like Demi Lovato speaks pretty openly. And I think just having people in powers of position starting to talk more openly about it definitely helps too.
yeah, when we had DeRozan open up, that was huge.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
Michael Phelps for the swim community, that was big.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, because when you look at Michael Phelps, typically, like, he's an Olympian and does very, very well. And so people seem to think because you're really strong in one area that you can't have any issues in another area. And quite frankly, I mean, I don't know if I could handle being famous the way that some of these people do. That's got to be tough.
Mhm.
Having the spotlight on you all the time. I know some people aspire to fame. That is not something that I care to have in my life. Would I like to be recognized in the area for, knowing what I know and being able to help people? Absolutely. But do I want the spotlight shine down on me? Not really.
No way.
That is
I
not
was
a goal of mine.
no. I was saying that because last year for the playoffs for Toronto, going back to basketball, like Siakam did
Sure.
not play well in the playoffs. He
Hmm.
didn't play well at all. And social media went nuts on him. Like just said the most uncalled for things. Like there was a petition to like ship him back to Africa. Like stuff like that that was so uncalled for because he couldn't play basketball well for like 3 games, 4 games. I was just thinking like, man, if my Twitter account blew up like that, I would not. I don't know how I'd handle it.
Well, I still need to take social media breaks, and I'm not even,
That's what. Yeah.
one of these big, famous people. And honestly, I'm very fortunate where, like, I haven't really gotten much negative stuff because, the things that I'm doing are, it's a very positive platform, and
Mhm.
its intent is really to help people. And I think people mostly see that. And if they don't, then maybe they just don't engage with us, which is fine if it's not an interest to them. Um, but even I need to take social media breaks. And my significant other will always be like, "Are you doing that for work, or are you just scrolling mindlessly?" Because it
Mm,
is like, it really can negatively impact you. And, you talk about the culture of comparison, and I've, shared pretty openly about this, but that's something that I really struggle with, is looking at other people's lives and feeling like, oh, like my life is so bland, or this person is so much better looking, or so much more successful, or, and sometimes I even do this off social media where, like, a lot of my friends are 20 years older, and I find myself comparing like where I'm at in my career to where they are. And it's like, Leah, they're 20 years ahead of you. Like, of course they're going to be in a different spot, silly,
mhm.
you know? Um, but I think, like, yeah, it's important to take social media breaks. And to another strategy, for young girls and, boys and all they alike, is to unfollow accounts that don't make you feel good. Like the second that you're like, oh man, I wish I had that. Or like, I guess that you just start negative self talk, just unfollow them, block them. Like, you don't need that negativity in your life.
Yeah, and don't feel pressured to unfollow someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone else mentioned that because like, you can ultimately you control what's on your timeline.
Sure.
Like you don't have to press
Mhm.
explore, but you're always on your timeline. So just if it feels like shit, just unfollow it. I struggle with that too a lot because I follow because now that I've come into this space, I've come into like this niche of podcasts for mental health and everything. I struggle with
Mhm.
it because my entire explore is podcasts like mine. And I'm like, holy fuck. Like I was because when I started, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be different. And I was like, I'm not different at all. So yeah, you have to that's
But you are, though. And this is something that, like, with my business that I've thought about, is like, there's other girls groups. Here's the thing though, Harry, is nobody is you, right?
Mhm,
Just like nobody is me. And so they're not going to present it in the same way. And for the fact that you were the one sharing it and sharing your story, that's something that nobody else can do.
mhm,
And the message that you're sharing is going to reach different people than the message that they're sharing. And what I always say too is, like, there are so many young people out there that need this type of support, that we could have literally every adult doing this kind of work, and it still might not be enough to reach all of the young people because it's easy to feel like you're in competition with them. But like, why not collaborate? Why not reach out to all of the other people doing mental health podcasts and be like, hey, I want you to come on because you're also an expert in this area.
Hmm.
Can we converse? Let's go ahead and make this movement even larger where, they share you on their network and vice versa. And like, how beautiful is that, right? Isn't that what this is all about? Is coming together and collaborating. You're here to spread the word and to help people. And if they're genuine in what they're doing, hopefully they would do the same.
Yeah, 100%. I had that convo with my mom actually because she's a real estate agent and there's like a trillion of them. Like we have a
Sure.
real estate agent on every block in my small town. So she's like, "Yeah,
Hmm.
just don't worry about it, man."
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's definitely like it's hard to like not just for me, but like for other people because I don't struggle with it that much. But like it for other like it's hard to get your mind off it. You know what I mean? Like when you're in the moment looking at those pages, you lose track of life almost.
Yeah. That's why you got to take a break.
Mhm.
You got to do some puzzles like me.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you got yeah. I can't. But like do something else. When I unplug, I
No,
feel
I mean, for
so
me,
good.
another big thing is exercising. And if you like sports, I would assume, I don't want to,
Mm?
be wrong in my assumption, yes, but that you would
Oh,
like to work out if you've done sports your whole life.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
or whatever, going for walks. You said going for walks. That is still exercise,
Yeah.
even if it's not, throwing around heavy weights or, doing hit workouts or whatever. That is still exercise and it is healthy for you and it gives you a break, time to clear your mind. Um, and that's something that's really big for me, which is actually what I'm going to do after we get off of this podcast is probably go work out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I struggled with when I retired from swimming, I struggled with the idea that because I would train like 8 to 10 times a week and it'd be
It's a
like
lot.
yeah, it was just like meters on meters on meters of swimming and I was in the best shape of my life. And I like when I got out of that, I forgot that workout didn't have to be 8 times a week all out. Like you're not an athlete anymore. You can go on walks and you can do yoga and you can go for a run twice a week maybe. So when I got out
Mhm.
of it and we were in the lockdown and I started walking, I was like, this isn't enough. I got to do something. And I would burn out like
Yeah,
3 days in.
I get that.
Hmm.
I've been there. I can relate.
Yeah. So if you're listening, man,
But also, you need to listen to your body and give your
that's true.
body a break too, and just because you're really physically fit doesn't mean you're necessarily overall healthy,
That's true.
as we're talking about, right? Because from what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you were swimming, you were still dealing with some mental health issues, and that was a more challenging time in your life still.
Oh, big time.
So, even though your body was super fit, were you fit as an entire person? You don't need to answer that question necessarily, but it's, rhetorical in the way that, there are different ways to stay healthy and you don't have to go all out. And you're right, especially when you're first starting, right? We can talk about like New Year's resolutions and goals. Oftentimes people are like, all right, when New Year's hits, I'm going to go to the gym or work out 7 days a week. That's great. But if you don't work out, don't set that goal for yourself because, like, well, some people could reach it, right? I don't want to tell people what to do here, but it's just not as realistic. You burn out a lot quicker. And, when you're setting goals for yourself, like the SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely, or whatever they are, that's one of the things is like, if you're going to start doing push-ups, don't say that your goal is to get, 200 push-ups in the first week that you start because it's just like you're going to get defeated. Have it be like 5 push-ups and like that's great. And then next week you could do a little more.
You've never done push-ups before. You're like, I'm gonna do 200 by the first day. January 1st, I'm starting at
That's
200.
what I'm saying. Like it's a little ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't make much sense. But
No.
that's just with anything else too, right? Like meditating or whatever. Like I'm not great at meditating, but
Oh,
I try.
I'm not either.
I try.
Yeah, trying. That's all we can do. When I'm in, okay, I don't, you probably, well, you might get this. I don't know. But when I meditate, I have to only do it to sound. I can't do it to a guided one. I can't listen to someone telling me what to do because they have that voice where they're like, and then you breathe in, and my mind goes, what are they talking about? Can they just like not? They're like, this voice is so annoying, and I'm like, shut up, shut up, shut up. So I have to.
I like the guided ones better because with my anxiety, otherwise, if I'm not listening to a guided one, then my head's just like
That's
thinking
true.
about all different stuff. So for me, it helps me to focus. But right, what works for you doesn't have to work for me, and
Mhm.
what works for me doesn't have to work for you. But
Yeah, of course.
I do. That's kind of how yoga is too. A lot of times, a lot of the instructors talk like that, and I shouldn't be stereotyping because it's not true. But I understand some of them have that very calming voice, which also sometimes puts me to sleep, which
Mm.
is something else that I need to get better at. Like when I'm meditating, is not just falling asleep, which is common. Like that's a common thing when people are first learning how to meditate is that they fall asleep. So,
Well, it's not the
I
worst way.
no,
So,
that's
yeah.
fine.
I
I
mean,
like to sleep.
yeah, there you go. I mean, I don't blame them. You got the calming music, you've got the soft voice in your ear. It's like, how can you not fall asleep?
Yeah, I don't know if I could be that person. I'm over here like yelling.
Yeah,
Not the calmest voice in the world.
could you
I guess I
imagine?
could practice.
That's true.
Breathe
Is that it?
in, 2, 3. Yep.
It
It was good,
worked.
wasn't it?
I meditated. I'm fully meditated.
Relaxed.
Oh man, more than ever.
Can you be meditated?
Is that a thing? Meditated? I don't think is that a term?
Might be a new one.
I made it up. We're making up words now, apparently. Um, yeah, no, I could never do it. Even if I got my voice to that like tone, I'd probably fall asleep while talking.
You could do it.
You think so?
I believe you could.
That's my
Yes.
next venture. This podcast is going
So
to
I'm
turn.
curious. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to nothing important. I was going to say this podcast is going to turn into a meditation guiding.
Maybe you should put one of them in there, you know? Wouldn't it be the worst to have one of the podcasts being a meditation? Also, here I am rocking. Do you see me? It's like I'm on a boat. I don't know why I'm rocking. I guess it's calming, right?
Mm.
I was curious to know if you've had any of your teammates reach out to you since you've started this, that maybe you wouldn't have thought would have reached out about this.
Everyone who like at this point, I pretty much expect the people that do reach out. But when I
Hmm.
first opened up, because the way I opened up, so U Sports, which is like the national athletic
Hmm.
organization up here for college or for university, they wrote an article on me for Bell Let's Talk Day, and so that was
Cool.
kind of the first thing I opened up with, and it was pretty overwhelming. And like, I got responses from friends and everything, but that wasn't really my full story. It was just kind of like, hey, I struggle and I'm still here, so whatever. Like I tried to be inspiring as opposed to being real about what I was going through. I'm trying to
Sure.
talk really hard if you can't tell. Um, but so yeah, so the first time I opened up about like suicidal thoughts and like how I was still struggling, because in the article I said I'm still here and kicking, and I'm better than before, but I wasn't. I just wanted to say that so that people wouldn't worry. So then as I was going through it, I joined like this men's only mental health panel at the university. It was like the first one ever, and it was in front of like
That's
300 people.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, the guys were super cool. And it was in front of like 300 people, and I was like, is this really going to be the first place I tell my actual story, like in front of 300 people? Like, I didn't reach out to anyone else. But there were a couple, I was hesitant to do that because at the time I was captain of the swim team, and all the captains before me never showed anything, because there was this idea that as a captain, you have to be tough and you have to like never wave in stress or emotion or anything. And I was like, I don't want to
Sure.
be the first captain to do that. But eventually I did. And then when I did it,
It's awesome.
yeah, it was overwhelming, but like all the rookie athletes reached out to me, like the first year people, which I did not expect. Like I thought my friends would. I thought that was a given, but when the whole team did, I was like, okay, this you can open up about things and still be a captain.
Yeah, you set a precedent for them and became that role model. And that's another huge part of what young women and young men need is just role models, people to look up to, who have been in these positions and stuff before.
Yeah. yeah, it's when you get people in positions of not power, but like role model positions, and they go, "Listen, I have struggles. I've been there before.
Mhm,
Like, you can come to me if you're having a problem." That just
mhm.
sets a different tone for the younger guys and girls.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I remember because the older guys never talked about it, but I remember the one time I had a panic attack in the locker room at before a
Mhm.
swim practice, and one of the fourth year students, he came up to me and just gave me a hug, and he was like,
Aw.
maybe go home and like rest up." And I haven't forgotten it, and the hug lasted like 4 seconds because as guys you hug, you're like, oh, what the fuck, but like the hug lasted like 4 seconds, and I haven't forgotten it because it's that easy
Mhm.
for
Now,
upper.
have you ever reached out to that person and been like, "Hey, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being there for me in that moment."
No, I haven't. I should.
Because I feel like sometimes moments like that, that other people might not remember that like were very impactful to you, it's important for them to realize that and recognize that,
Yeah.
and it makes them feel good. And I think sometimes it makes you feel good to also give somebody that acknowledgement. So I challenge you to maybe reach out to that person and just say, "Hey, here's what I'm doing," if they don't already know what you have going on, and that moment was a pivotal moment for me in my own journey. So
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah, I haven't even thought of that. I should definitely reach out to that guy. But it's like it's little things like that, right? Like another example, and I've reached out to this girl, but when I was like at like right before I went to get help, like when I was really low, like the comfort and not being here when that was at an all-time high,
Hmm.
my friends could tell. Like you give
Sure.
off a different energy. And
Hmm.
so my one friend, she was like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I was like, "No." And I told her, and then she was like, "Well, why don't we? Have you gone to therapy about it, or like have you told someone?" I was like, "No, I don't want to go to therapy. Fuck that." And then she was like, "I'll walk you there." And then she did, and she waited in the waiting room. And like it's little things like that that take very minimal effort
Yeah,
that
that's
change
awesome.
you. Yeah.
And I appreciate talking to you too, because in a lot of ways, this is helpful for me because I feel like I'm so involved in this world of mental health now that sometimes I forget how challenging it can be, for somebody. So to hear kind of that story of you going back and being like, I didn't want to go and it was hard. And, I needed somebody's support to be able to go there with me is a really good reminder that not everybody is on the same page or on the same level, and that there are people who are just different points on their journey. And I think because I've become so comfortable talking about mental health and like my experience in going to therapy, and like I mean, I guess it actually wasn't that easy because it was just oh man, probably a few weeks ago that I first opened up about like being medicated, because for me that was kind of taboo still.
Mm,
um, and so that for me was like really, really tough. And I'm like, do I want to share about this open? And I'm glad that I did, but that was really hard. But yeah, I just appreciate you sharing your story with me, and hearing this from somebody else. It makes me that much more excited to kind of get going in my career in this mental health field, to realize that the impact that it can have on other people, and helping them to feel better in their lives, I guess.
well, yeah, what you're doing is so important because you're targeting kids who, they might not have a role model, and they might,
Hmm.
think that I'm the
Hmm.
only one going through it and I'm just not worthy of living if I think that way. So it's important to
Hmm.
have role models like you, empower them.
Now, do you ever go and speak to schools, like to young men, about your experience and your journey ever?
I've got my first one coming up late February.
Good
So
luck. That's super exciting. Will it be
shit.
virtual or is this in person?
Virtual. It's virtual.
Okay.
Yeah, which kind of sucks, but like it is.
Yeah, as are most things right now.
Yeah, so that'll be my first one. I haven't really talked to places. I don't know. I would love to. I think I
Mhm.
was waiting on like being in person, but you know what I mean?
Sure.
Because I feed off a room's energy. Like
Yeah,
interviewing people through Zoom, it's fine, but like I'd rather be in person. You know what I mean? Because I feed off that
I get
energy.
it.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, I'm in the Cleveland area, you're in Canada. It would have been a lot harder to do,
Hmm.
so there are definite perks of, being virtual and being able to connect with people from, really all around the world. I did a podcast, I don't know when it was, maybe a couple months back or something, with this woman in Ghana. So that was really cool.
That's cool.
Um, because it's like, also culturally, the experiences are different and the way that people look at mental health in different countries is different. So, like, I enjoy hearing, and I would say, I don't know, I can't say knowledgeably, but I would say that Canada and the US are somewhat similar in kind of where we're at with speaking about mental health. And I don't know, do you know anything about that?
I don't, but I would assume so.
Sure,
Same
but in
thing.
other countries though, it can be very, very different.
Hmm.
And so I would love to, speak to more people from different places to hear from them and their experiences, because I just think that's so neat.
I know it's all different. I was talking to someone who has like a background in like Southern Asian communities about mental health and like where they are in like recognizing it. It's so interesting because it's like it's not polar opposite, but it's like different.
Sure.
It's just
Yep.
interesting to see the different uh,
Hmm.
ways people are talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Also, wait, where did it go? I lose it every time I want to show it. Oh, yeah. There you go. This is my medication bottle. I keep it with me to remind myself that it's okay that you're medicated. Because
Yeah.
I also hated admitting that, and I made a video
Well,
about it.
go
Well,
ahead.
I made a video about it, and like before I posted, I was like, I'm not gonna do this. This is stupid. But like to your point, like it's important to tell people.
Yeah, and I think for me, it definitely helped me because I think there were still some biases that I had about it before I went on it. Like, I remember having the conversation with my therapist, being like, "Yeah, I don't want to go on medication. I'm not going to do that," and her just being like, "I just want you to know that it's an option. If all else fails, you still have another option." And I think it's definitely helped me to realize that it's okay, and it's not that big of a deal, really. And my dosage isn't even high, but just like a little bit to help balance, the chemicals in my body, it really has made a difference.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe one day I'll be able to go off, maybe I won't. I don't know. Right now is not the time though. I mean, I'm going through a lot of really big changes, writing a book, finishing up grad school, looking for a job once I graduate, so now is not the time, but maybe eventually. But the thing that my doctor had said, and I actually have a friend who said that their doctor said the same thing, which I thought was a really great kind of example of like why it's important, and helped me to feel better about it, was they were like, "You're the best type of person to work with. You're already doing all the other things. You're eating pretty healthy, you're exercising, fairly regularly, you've tried everything that you can, and unfortunately that's still not enough." And so, if somebody has something like diabetes, you don't all of a sudden, stop eating well and stop exercising, but your body needs to be a little bit more regulated. And comparing it to something like that was like, oh, this makes sense. Like, there's just an imbalance in my body, and like, that's okay.
Hmm.
And it has helped with that. So I am becoming more open and vulnerable and sharing about that, even though sometimes it is challenging, because like you said, I feel like people think like you're crazy, and it's like, but my anxiety is also what has helped me to be, I don't know, as successful as I am, right? Like, I think, for my age, I'm doing okay. Like, I'm happy, right? Isn't that what, success is, I guess, is different for everybody. But for me, is like, for the most part, like, I'm genuinely happy with the life that I'm living. Like, I enjoy the things that I'm doing. I have good people in my life. I'm healthy. Like, it doesn't really get that much better than that. Um, so yeah, it's all good. It's
Hmm.
good.
Yeah, exactly. That's the message, man. I feel like, well, when I turned down medication for the first 100 times, it was because I didn't, because I was like, I don't want to get addicted. I think
Yeah.
that's a big fear.
Yeah. Which is possible, and you have to be careful. And
Mhm.
but that's also like why you go to a doctor and they like start you on a lower dosage, and then they should slowly increase the progression of that and have conversations about like which kind to go on, and like your history and what might be best for you and why it might be best for you, and like don't be afraid to ask those questions.
Mhm.
Um that's what I would say is like, educate yourself a little bit about what it is you're putting into your body still, so that you have an understanding of like the potential side effects. Because I was fortunate where the first one that I went on worked.
Mhm.
But I have other friends who literally have tried like every single one and had some of the most horrible side effects, and like it made things a lot worse. um, and what works, again, just like with self-care and stuff, what works for one person's body isn't necessarily going to work for somebody else's. So just because, I don't know what kind you're on, but it's not necessarily going to be the same.
Yeah.
So you got to figure out what's best for you.
Yeah, that first one did not work for me at all.
Hmm.
Like that's why it's important again to open up about, if you take it, if you don't, because then people, well, first of all, yes, get research, get slightly educated, because what I did, I heard the first word, I was like, I'm taking it. And I didn't look into it at all. And that bit me in the ass. But like, if, when people share it and they go, hey, this one worked for me, or listen, it took me like 5 different tries to get one that did work, then the journey becomes a little less confusing, because when
Hmm.
I got on that first one, no one told me that, it might not work. I just assumed that, I'd take a happy pill and I'd be cured. So I took
Hmm.
these pills and like my brain was not good on them. Like it felt like I remember it felt like my brain had flatlined, because I had no
Hmm.
emotion or reaction to anything, and I just looked really
Hmm.
sick. And people were like, I would swim and I'd have to get out because like my body would go numb because my heart was beating so fast, and like they'd have to carry me out of the pool. And people were like, "You gotta talk to your doctor about that." And I was like, "No, no, no." But
Yeah.
she prescribed them to me, so they have to work. But
Right.
that's not the case for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you had said, like just thinking that it's some happy pill, is like, it's not like you go on it and now all of a sudden you're like happy all the time
Mhm.
either. Like you still have up days, you still have down days. It just helps to regulate you. And honestly, like I was learning a little bit more about acceptance and commitment therapy, and and learning a little bit more about that. It's also like happy is not like a baseline state. You know what I mean? Of emotion is like it's perfectly normal to have good days and bad days in your life, and like to think that you can consistently be happy every single day is just it just is not. It's not a thing. Right?
Yeah, you can't. You'd get so tired.
I'm telling you.
Imagine that energy where you're like the happiest ever all day, every day. No, thank you. I'd rather be sad. I mean, I can't say that. I'd rather have both. That's what I meant. But yeah, that
Well, it's funny when you talk about like energy levels. I often say, Leah, you're either like super energetic or you're asleep. Like those are your two states.
that's so
Like,
funny. Yeah,
nope,
no,
just me.
it's true though. Yeah, to your point again, like the therapist, what my therapist told me that comforted me was, because I was like, I don't want to go on them. I don't want to be dependent on a pill. She was like, listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it cures everything. When you take medication, it's like maximum 20%. Well, again, for some people it's not, but for people in my situation, me personally, she said medication was 20% of your recovery. It's not 100. 80% comes from other things. So just think of it as like a little addition, as opposed to
Yeah.
something to be dependent on. And that made
Right.
it a lot less scary.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about your book for a second. So
Sure.
what's in the book? Like what inspired you to write this book to begin with? And then when does it come out?
So, what inspired me to write it? The work that I'm doing with the young women, right? Which is what inspired me to go back to school as well. Empowered and Poised is really kind of what's got me doing a lot of what I'm doing, because I just love what I do. And I also wanted to learn more, right? I wanted to be more of an expert in this area. And I felt like this was going to push me outside of my comfort zone to expand my knowledge. And then also to be able to continuously help other people. So the majority of the work I do is with youth, but this book is written for the adults. So it's written for any adults who work or live with girls. So teachers, social workers, parents, caregivers, things of that nature. And so I felt like it was a way to be able to work with the adults and help them to learn about some of the insights that I've gained over the years that I've been working in this field. And then also through all of these people whose stories I heard. So I've interviewed over 30 individuals who are either an expert when it comes to young women or who have experienced some of these challenges that young women face when it comes to self-esteem and confidence. So I'm really excited about it. It comes out this summer. So will officially be published this year, 2021. So, when you're looking at, how's the year going to go, at least one big thing will be accomplished, and two, because I'll be graduating. So that's really exciting.
Ooh,
But yeah, I would love to be able to share the insights with more people so that more people can get this message about how to help young women building their self-esteem and confidence.
I love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank
This
you. And
summer.
thank you for asking.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I think that's all I have. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is that it explores how intersectionality plays a role in the development of a young girl and her self esteem and confidence. So, what
Mm,
I mean by that is the different groups that you're a part of. So, your race, your culture, your ethnic background, your socioeconomic status, things of that nature. Because what I always say is that a one size fits all approach doesn't work when it comes to helping girls build self esteem and confidence. And the same would go for young men as well, right? I don't want to, not share that's the same thing, is that we need to make sure we're looking at the unique individual, which is a lot of what you and I have been talking about this entire conversation that we've been having, is that you have to figure out how it works best for those people in your life. And so I wanted to make sure that it was inclusive of individuals from all different backgrounds, because I think that that's something that many other platforms and books fail to recognize, which is something that I'm also very passionate about.
yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of the books and stuff, they kind of have that one size fits all approach
Hmm.
where like you're reading it
Yeah.
and you're like, I don't relate to that at all. Maybe I'm just uncurable.
You're not uncurable. And I also don't think self-esteem and like confidence are something to be cured, right? Like there's something to like I think it's inside everybody to like have confidence. You just need to like help them to bring that out. Like figure out what their strengths are, what their values are, affirm them, you know, um allow them to experience different things and engage with them, listen to them, all those different kinds of things. I think it's just helping them to pull it out of themselves and to
Hmm.
recognize that they can.
Yeah. And that's so important for young women, especially because, like, you know, the future's female, man. That's what I've heard. It better be. I'm tired of these
That's
old
what I've
men.
heard.
I'm tired of these old men running stuff.
Hey, that's going to be you one day.
I know. I know. I don't want to believe it. No, I'm not going to be like that, please. Um, yeah, because just like, they've done research where, like, more empowered young women leads to just a better community in general. And I feel like it's
Yeah.
important for young girls to, really recognize their self-worth.
Absolutely, because I mean, these young girls eventually become moms and their sisters and their aunts and their teachers and their, whoever they want to be. And like, let's not pigeonhole it to the careers that are more typically female based. Um, and so, yeah, I think that women have a very large impact on the community. Um, and so I'm excited. Like, I'm excited for the future. We have a long way to go, as I've said time and time again today, but I'm really hopeful and I'm really excited.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm excited too. I can't wait till I'm an old grumpy man and I see females running the
You're
show.
not going to be an old grumpy man.
Just wait 50 years. I'm gonna like, ah, God.
All right, I'll hear
Anyway.
from you then.
Yeah, right. Well, listen, Leah, I really love what you're doing, and I love like your programs and your book. I can't wait to read it. I'm gonna read it. I promise. Um,
Woohoo!
and I think what you're doing is so great, and I'm really glad you came on to talk to me a little bit. That was like that little moment where we talked about that guy. I haven't felt that kind of in like most of my episodes. So just to let you know, you pulled a heartstring today.
Aw. Well, thank you for allowing me to do that. And thank you for inviting me on. It's been wonderful getting to know you and hear your story. And I'm excited to see where, life takes you and this journey of, your podcast is going to take you. Because I think more men need to be involved in this conversation when it comes to mental health. And so I appreciate you and the work that you're doing. So thank you again.
Thank you. Yeah. Where can my viewers find you?
They can find my website at www.empoweredandpoised.com, which is empowered and poised. All of our social media handles are empowered poised with no and then they can find me personally at It's Leah B, ITSLEAHBEE.
I love it.
And then if they want to connect, through email or whatever, they can find it on those sites.
Perfect. And with that, we're done. To all my viewers, I will see you guys next time.
Thanks so much.
Hey guys, thanks for watching another episode of my show. If you want more episodes of the H Panel, the button's going to be right here. If you want to subscribe for more videos from myself, it'll be right down below. Please like, comment, share, give 5 stars. Let's keep this conversation going, guys, all right? I'll see you next time. Thank you for your support.